Today we're going to be doing the initial fill and the beginning of a startup procedure on an HT60. This applies for all of the horizontal feed water tanks and return tanks that we produce. We're looking at the end head assembly here. Here we have our sight glass, our chemical injection quill, our level float, a thermometer, and then our preheat injection kit. We're mostly going to be focusing on the water level setting of the tank and the initial fill of the tank. When we first arrive at this tank, it is going to be empty. Obviously our sight glass is completely empty and our valves are open. The float mechanisms do ship with a retaining clip behind them, so we're going to start by going ahead and removing the clip. So as you remove the clip from the float, it's going to go ahead and drop down and you'll hear water start entering the tank. Typically it's good to allow a few minutes of water to enter the tank just to get some on the bottom, and then we'll open up the drain after a few moments to flush out any debris that may be left in there from manufacturing. Once we've flushed about 30 seconds of water down to the drain, we can go ahead and close the drain ball valve and we'll allow the tank to start to fill until we see water inside of the sight glass. Once it is filling, or once it is full into the sight glass, is when we'll set the start and stop behavior of the float assembly. We set the start and stop behavior based on how much return water we are going to see coming back from the system. Many systems out there will operate with someplace between 10% returns all the way up to 90%. If we have 90% returns, we want to run the tank low enough to allow that return someplace to come back into the tank so we don't overflow the tank and go down to the drain. If we're running very low returns, we typically will run the tank a little bit on the full side, since we don't need to concern ourselves with that. Here we're starting to get some water into the sight glass. Because this is set in the middle, I would expect it to stop filling right around the middle of the tank. If we wanted to adjust the lever, we loosen the two screws on the top and bottom, and that'll allow the float assembly to move down towards the bottom. We can go ahead and tighten these up with it at its lowest position, and you can see the float is just getting ready to start actuating here shortly. With a float style and a solenoid valve like this tank, our incoming water pressure can be anywhere between 40 psi up to 100 psi. If we have the ball float where it's all in one right on the front head, the maximum water pressure is 30 psi. Our float's now actuated and closed off the solenoid. We're just about half. As we start to lose some water out of the tank, we'll lose about an inch or so of water before it does actually actuate to turn the solenoid back on to refill the tank. So this gives us roughly about half of the volume of the tank allowed for return water coming back from the system. So this allowed for about 2 inches of drop in the sight glass before the solenoid reactivated to start refilling the tank. Our other option is we can move the other slider, the off slider, all the way up to the very top here, which now this will give us a much larger deadband and it will provide more water in the tank. With low return systems, this is very helpful to give the water more time to actually preheat and come up to the optimum temperature before it's pumped into the boiler, since we're not getting all that return back from the system. Here you can see our water level is now reached about 2 inches from the very top of the sight glass, which just will give us a very nice wide deadband where we're just adding water intermittently to the return tank. If you wanted to keep the tank full up at this level with a very narrow deadband where we were just adding small amounts of water on a regular basis, we can then loosen up this bottom and tighten that up. So now we're all the way up at the very top. So now as we start to drain some of the water off, it'll actually start turning on and adding water while still maintaining a full tank. So here we've lost a few inches inside of the sight glass and our solenoid's now kicked back on and it's going to fill it back up to the very top.